Good evening and welcome to the Moving Home with Charlie weekly workshop with Charlie Lambden and guests. Live at 8 p.m. every Wednesday. This show is here to help all home movers of the UK be better prepared for dealing with the gauntlet that is trying to move home.
Helping make sure everyone has a home.
Whether you're buying, selling or both, it's a live show. So if you have a question about your move, pop it in the live chat. In the meantime, sit back, have a noisy slurp of your drink, and enjoy the show.
Sorry, I can't resist it.
Is that Guinness in a red wine glass?
That is Guinness in a large red wine glass, yes.
I thought I was desperate. Anyway.
Have you had nothing to drink today or just not very much?
Nothing at all.
Okay. Well, I opened a can of Guinness earlier and I put it in the glass and then I looked at the glass and it was empty. So I just put another one in. I don't know where the first one went. Good evening, Alex. Welcome.
Good evening, Charlie.
Everybody. Now, I know Alex and I are often very jovial and very laughy and giggly. It's our gallows humor. But to everybody affected by what's happening in the new builds market, people working in that industry, there's nothing funny about it. So please don't mistake our joviality and gallows humor for not caring about the impact that what we're discussing this evening is having on trades and people with jobs and all kinds of stuff, right? So we're just going to try and put an amusing spin on a fairly tragic turn of events. However, Alex, I might kick off with something that I haven't primed you for.
Of course. Why change the habit of a lifetime?
Do you think that what we're seeing here is the chickens coming home to roost after decades of lobbying for government support of the house building industry?
Are you suggesting that we should blame the builders for what is now happening to them? Because I think that's a little bit harsh.
Hang on. I blame the government first and foremost, but then the governments are lobbied by the house builders. The house builders are they're the largest donors of all groups, and they have successfully lobbied for astonishing artificial stimulus for new builds in particular, for 10 years of Help to Buy, 20% being loaned by the taxpayer and 40% in London. And as you and I have discussed many times, that plus lending multiples, plus buy-to-let mortgages available to anyone that really wants one, increased lending multiples, has all of these things together have pushed prices to the point where quite clearly buyers are now voting with their wallets and going, no.
That's true, but it's a little bit chicken and egg. When you have a heroin addict who becomes so addicted that they end up dying, do you blame the heroin addict for their addiction, or do you blame the dealer for supplying the heroin in the first place? And the reason I put it that way is because you're quite right. The construction industry lobbies massively with the government and donates vast sums of money in order to get stimulus that will allow them to build and retain a profit margin. But you've got to bear in mind that with the other hand, the government imposes restrictions like you must build 40% affordable homes. You've got to reduce your prices by 20% from fair market value to provide affordable homes. And you've also got to contribute vast sums of money through levies and the S106 to local infrastructure, some of which is absolutely required. You can't put in a huge housing development without upgrading. However, as I think I've discussed in the past with you, I've seen S106 orders used to justify an additional £1 million from the developer to support a local mosque in an area where it really isn't necessary given the facilities that already exist. And so it's pretty cynical to be hitting developers for huge sums of money when you then, on the other hand, have to provide stimulus in order to make it viable for them because you've given them so many regulations and ways to stitch them. It's very chicken and egg.
Okay. Now, there are people watching, most of the people watching, I suspect, are people who really aren't concerned about the plight of the house building industry. They're worried about their own future insofar as owning a home is concerned. And are you okay for me to ask you the questions? I sent you these in an email.
Yes, I've got them. I saw them 2 minutes ago.
So again, for the benefit of all of our new followers, and welcome, by the way, to all the new followers, and we do have new followers every single week. And roughly speaking, 50% of all the views on every video are new followers, amazingly. Half of you watch a lot, half of you watch once and never again, by the sound of things. But this is a question I'd like to start with. In fact, hang on, before we do that, I should probably just share on the screen the Molior report.
Yeah.
So this is an organization that studies the whole housing market. Residential development in London, and these are developments with 20 or more private homes, and this is their Q3 report. So it is hot off the press, okay? And the headlines are, between 2015 and 2020, there were 60 to 65,000 homes for private sale or rent under construction in London at any given time. Today, that number has fallen to 40,000, and 5,300 of those are halted, part built.
Yeah.
With a surge of completions expected in 2026, Molior forecasts that just 15 to 20,000 new homes will be actively under construction on the 1st of January 2027. That is, unless government removes unnecessary development costs and adjusts stamp duty. And the 5 sections that it goes into are: sales rates are very low. That couldn't be much lower, actually. Build to rent has ended in London. That's a hell of a statement, isn't it? No buyers equals no construction starts. Prices need to fall, but they can't. So there are 281,000 dwellings that have planning permission to be built, but aren't. They haven't started building them.
Yeah.
So this is the background, and it's got some fascinating stats in here, which we'll go through a bit later. This is the other graph that was in the headlines, and that Times journalist has written an article using this data. And that blue line there is starts, new construction starts, and that is lower. That's down at 5,000. That is lower than in 2009. Sales aren't quite yet down as low as 2009, according to this for 2003. So,
and a lot of that off-plan money was foreign investment. When you're a developer, you tend to be quite highly leveraged. You're borrowing a lot of money, which means you really want to get the construction component done as quickly as possible to reduce your risk and reduce your interest payments. So once that money comes in and you've got guaranteed sales, you will push forward and build out as much as you can, as quickly as you can. But if people are not buying off plan, i.e. before you've actually started or during construction, then that extra money isn't accrued. So you have to be really certain that you're not going to build something which ends up empty. And if you're not certain and you don't have that money coming in, you simply don't build. I mean, why would you go ahead? Why would you take that risk?
Right. Let's ask some questions that I think a lot of relatively uninitiated people in this topic might wonder, because obviously where I want to go with this is how it affects the wider housing market and prices. But question number one, if there's a shortage of homes, a rising population, and lenders are lending, why have people in London almost completely stopped buying new builds?
Because they're too bloody expensive, and we have reached pretty much the affordability level that people are comfortable with. Wages, although they have gone up over the last few years, really haven't beaten inflation, and people now have extended, they've already extended themselves to an average, I think, of 34 years as an initial mortgage term, rising up to 40 more recently, with multiples of 4.5 times plus their salaries. And they just simply can't afford it. And the builders can't build them any cheaper. We're stuck in this between rock and hard place. It costs what it costs to build, and that's roughly, depending on the spec of what you're building, about £3,000 per square meter from a construction perspective. Once you then add in the value of the land, your planning obligations, and so on and so forth, it's very hard to make money on anything that doesn't sell for less than £6,000 a square meter. So take an average 100 square meter place. I mean, the average in the UK is lower than that, but take 100 because it makes the maths easy. That means that you have to sell it for £600,000. And that's an average. In London, you'd have to sell it for substantially more than that. And people just don't have the money as first-time buyers. It's why some of the only building that is still happening is at the luxury end of the market, because there you can charge so much more. I mean, 100 square meters, you might still be charging, 1.5 million, £15,000 a square meter for a luxury flat, but you certainly can't charge that for a standard new build. So people, aren't touching them.
But the official figures we had for the most recent month from the land registry was, I think it was 19 or 20 in a month, actual sales. I mean, for such a big industry that employs so many people, that is we're not exaggerating, are we, if we call that a complete collapse in sales?
Yeah.
And yet it's not getting much press, is it? I mean, it's mentioned and you see it in the Financial Times here and there, but it's not getting any mainstream coverage, is it? Yet I think it's relevant.
It's not mainstream, but you may remember I did some graphs. Let me just share something with you quickly here. Let's see if you can see. Can you see that?
There we go. There
Okay.
it is.
That is CBRE's report from a few months ago. Now, CBRE are one of the big consultancy management type companies in construction. They were an aggregation of two companies some time ago, Richard Ellis and an American, the CB component. And they put out these reports, and they actually referenced the Molior report as well, because it's very well respected. The graph on the left shows the number of starts, permissions, and applications. Now, applications is the dark blue, and you can see that at the end of 24, it was beginning to go up. Now, it was still very low, still much lower than the 30,000 homes that there were permissions for, applications for, running from 2014 through until 2021. But it had risen. The problem is the lighter blue line, which is the permissions, because we've just brought in, or not just, we've brought in recently regulations about tall buildings, anything over 18 meters, and whole gateway 2 stages that developers have to go through. And so actually we're getting more denials, and also there's not enough council staff and permissions are taking longer. So you can see there's quite a gap there between applications and permissions. And that means without the permission and then the ensuing build, nothing is going to get built. And we are down at the permissions point at below where we were in 2010, just as Molior says on the actual on the start. And that is, it's frightening. And on the right hand side, you can see that the build to sell and the build to rent sales. I mean, look at Q1 of 25. Build to rent is now a much smaller proportion, and build to sell is tiny, again, back to where we were in 2010. And this is brought out by an industry leader absolutely vested in things going well in the construction market.
So just to keep it, well, I'm going to put the next question in here and put it on the screen. No, that's not it. Let me just stop sharing that. if the companies selling new builds can't sell them, what does that mean for prices of new builds that people have bought in the last 5 years?
Oh, well, this is the sad thing. So if you are a developer, if you're building, you have to take all of the costs that we've discussed previously, the land, the construction costs, the design, the planning, etc., into account, and then you will market your product plus 15 to 20% profit, and that's what you will sell it for. However, all bets are off in the same way that you can go and buy a luxury Mercedes, and the moment you drive off the forecourt, you might lose £30,000. The same is true once an individual owns a new build. So when you come to resell it, and lots of people in London have discovered this already, you know, if you bought any time after 2016, which was the peak of costs or prices really in London, people are selling at a loss. Over 30% of people who are selling today a new build they bought from 2015 onwards are selling it for less money in nominal terms than they bought it for in London, because that's where we hit our peak, was 2016. And the same is true for anything. Anyone who bought a new build in 22, 23, pretty much anywhere in the country, possibly, although the north is slightly different, they're at risk of selling at the moment for less than they bought it for. You know, and unlike the developers that can choose not to develop or can offer incentives to buy so that the price still appears to be what it is, for a private individual selling their 5-year-old new build, they'll get what the market's willing to pay, and the market is not willing to pay what they did.
So, in a way, the warnings that we were giving back in 2022, late 2022, 2023, about being very careful what you pay for, especially if it's a new build.
Yeah.
But if anything, we undercooked the warning level, didn't we?
Well, you were fairly robust in your warning, Charlie. I mean, you were accused of doom mongering at the time, and it's like, no, that's just the way it is. You always lose in the first few years. You're always going to lose 10% on new build, even in good times. But now, over 6 or 7 years, where you might expect to, you know, for the price to actually increase, you're potentially still losing substantially more than 10%.
So this is a post from a follower on X who bought a new build within the last 5 years. Louisa Metcalf, haven't sold at a 65k loss to what she paid for it. So I'm now renting it out at a £1,000 loss per month due to 40% tax on income as need to move due to new baby. There should be mortgage interest relief for leasehold owners given the government's inability to reform a leasehold. And implementation of new regs which have flooded the market flats. She goes on to say that she actually cannot sell. It's not a question that she wouldn't sell and take the loss. The lender won't allow it.
Why?
Well, she hasn't got the capital to cover.
Oh, well then no, they won't allow it. No, she's stuck. She's absolutely stuck. If you can't cover it. Oh,
I mean,
poor woman.
I asked her and she replied, I said, with the benefit of hindsight, would you have been better renting? And she said, yeah, I'd have been better renting. Where is it? I'm trying to find it because we ended up.
It's a very sad story.
But, you know, it really is a sad story. And this is what I mean. And people think when I say this, that I'm just anti-mortgages and anti-buying. And I'm not. And this all comes back to this problem that you and I both agree on, which is that it's not that it's bad to buy a house. It's bad to overpay because the overpayment can affect your life in so many ways. And the reason everyone has to overpay if they want to afford a home is because lending multiples have grown and grown and grown, and buy-to-let mortgages have pushed prices up out of reach. And so either you overborrow to overpay, or you can't get a home. And you know, this is why I think for a lot of people now, an increasing number of people, they're looking at this and going, you know, renting's not great financially, but at least you know that you're not going to get hit. You're certainly not going to get negative equity, number one. Number two, you won't get any big maintenance costs out of the blue, number two. And you won't have uncapped service charges, number three. So renting, you're liability is absolutely limited. It's capped at what you're paying for rent, and that's it. And so
Yeah.
now I don't think it doesn't matter what the future is looking like for the economy or house prices or anything else. If you are going to be buying what you expect to be your forever home, a home you want to buy, move in, and live in for the duration, then there's never don't. If you can afford it, buy it. It doesn't matter. Just buy it, live in it, enjoy living in it, enjoy owning your home, pay off the mortgage as fast as you can. But if you think you're going to be moving in the next few years now,
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
very, very risky, as that poor lady has discovered herself. And now, and actually, we've got someone commenting here. Andy Barnes, who's very bravely admitting, anyone got any tips for buyer's remorse for someone that didn't take Charlie's advice and now regrets their purchase? And I said, really? And he replied, unfortunately, yes. It is my own fault for falling into the trap of just get a home and being overly excited by my 95% mortgage.
Oh,
I've
ouch.
learnt my lesson, and now I'm an avid fan of the channel. Well, you're very welcome, and I'm glad to have you. And Andy, I'm grateful to you for sharing your story, because it's a salutary tale. You know, it is a. It's just such a delicate thing, right? We got more questions to get through.
Go for it.
The next one: does a complete collapse in new build sales have a collateral effect on the rest of the flats market? And could this explain why older flats aren't selling well in London either?
Partly, yes, but there are so many issues. So, the older flats, many of them, and this is the problem, you got to, let's define the difference between old, new, and so on. If we say new build is anything built in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And then you have flats that have been built post 1980. And then you've got flats in, before that, like the one I live in, built in the 60s, or conversions of terraced houses and so on and so forth. They are three very different markets, and actually many more than that. And of course, the market changes by location as well. But let's just take those as the three. The brand new builds, the service charges are fairly well understood, and they are, with some exceptions, less likely to change over the short term, because they've already calculated the maintenance based on the materials they use to build it. Where people are getting really badly stung are those flats that were built from 80 to 2015, let's say, and suddenly they haven't been putting enough aside, and then the lifts in the block all need doing, the roof needs redoing, or worst case of all with the Grenfell piece, the cladding needs redoing, and their service charges are astronomical. And so there's a lot of negative press about flats, and that just naturally turns people off them. So new build prices, or new builds occurring, falling, is absolutely having an impact. But there are lots of other things, like, so the service charges, the whole cladding piece, just the oversupply, because buy-to-let landlords are selling flats left, right, and center. So there are a lot more flats on the market. And this is where it's one of the only times that supply and demand is important in the housing in terms of cost, where you've got a massive oversupply suddenly, because you simply can't build as fast as landlords can sell. So they've hit the market pretty quickly all at one time. And when you add these together, there's a lot of downward pressure on flats, because they are leasehold. And people are now very scared of leasehold because of the service charges and so on and so forth. So whereas for our generation, when you bought your first property, it was probably a flat. And that was the case for every single one of our peers in their early 50s. Everyone bought a flat. It was seen as a good thing. You made sure it had 2 bedrooms, and the bathroom had to have a window so you didn't get mold. But that was pretty much it. You bought a flat. Today, buyers are not in their early 20s. They're in their mid 30s. And so by their mid-30s, number one, a flat may not suit their lifestyle because they may be looking to have children, although that's rare in this country, but they may be. And they may think that actually, rather than having a flat to start with all of its leasehold problems, I would rather go straight into a house where I can have a child or two children. It's freehold, so I don't worry about service charges. And yes, there's more maintenance and those maintenance costs, but at least I'm in control of when that happens. Whereas with the service charge, I'm not. So short answer, yes, it does impact overall flat prices, but it is not the only thing.
Right, because as I've experienced with the agents in London that I'm working with, the flat sales are. The market for flats appears to have just fallen away. And like you said, it depends on what kind of flats they are when they were built. And Victorian conversions tend to be doing better as leasehold flats than purpose-built blocks of the older kind. I've just been looking through some of the questions here. The more I think about this, the more surprised I am that there isn't a lot more being talked about in the media. That article, that Times journalist is doing an article on it, or has done one, but it's still not really, it feels genuinely to me, and I've been walking all around London today, and I've been coming to London every week, and it's the first time, 2008 was a credit crunch. Do you remember?
Yeah, of course.
It wasn't a downturn in the housing market. It was a liquidity dry up. Okay, the lending stopped. That's what caused it.
Banks battened down the hatches and said, "Oi, we're not handing over any money, despite the fact you've just bailed us out, and we've got all this quantitative easing floating around. We're giving none of it away." After their splurge of, it was the hangover from, "Hey, everybody, have 10 credit cards."
Yeah. But this, whatever you want to call the economic environment and housing market environment we're in now, it's got this weird, and I know that the South is experiencing a very different thing from the North, but I'm also hearing reports from the front lines in the North that it's slowing down up there as well.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that. They for the last couple of years, the disparity between North and South has been narrowing, in that the North has held up pretty well, whereas certainly in central London things have gone very badly. But now you're saying the North is slowing down as well, huh?
That's what I've heard. And I've actually heard that from agents when I've publicly said, "Hey, the North is still going great guns," and the agents are going, "No, actually not so much."
Oh, okay.
We're starting to feel a slowdown here as well. So,
but the difference, Charlie, between now and 2008 is, in the lead up to 2008, lots of things happened at the same time. And some of them were good and some of them were bad because they were hopium on good. But what had happened was we had interest rates that were averaging about 5%, and mortgage rates at around sort of 6%-ish. Some were lower for fixed, etc., etc. But wages had been increasing in real terms. There'd been lots of wage growth, and you would expect house prices to rise with wage growth because that's what they do. You have more money, you spend more money on the house that you want. But we'd also loosened credit massively, and that's why you had the explosion and you had the separation between wages and house prices. But don't forget, wages had been going up. For the last 15 years, barring the inflationary experience of 22 onwards when wages did increase, but only really to match inflation, we've had stagnant wages. Yep. And we've had interest rates down at 0.5%, and mortgage rates getting as low as 1.5%. Sorry, about 1.5, I think, was pretty standard low in 21. And so we're coming from a totally different place. Vast amounts of debt already accrued, but no wage growth. But house prices are up purely because of the mechanics of the lending, whereas previously they were up partly because of the mechanics of the lending, but also because of wage growth. And so we've done it again. We've managed to create this big, unaffordable housing. Developers can't afford to viably develop. People can't afford to buy, even with extending mortgages and increasing their multiples of salary. And so we're stuck in that impasse. But that isn't because we've had this big boom period of high wages. No, we've managed to do that through an entirely stagnant 15 years, which just goes to show how addicted we are to spending every single penny we can possibly lay our hands on a house.
I don't know about you, but today I drove past the Land Rover dealership in Battersea. Dovercourt thing. It's closed. Huge thing. It was brand new. They only built it a few years ago.
Wow. Yeah, that is big. Yeah.
And I mean, a week or two ago, I drove past. It was full of Range Rovers and Land Rovers and everything else. Today, I drove past, not a single car in sight, and a big sign up in the window saying, "We have relocated." And then some people up on a cherry picker taking down the Land Rover signs.
Yeah.
Relocated to our other existing showroom.
Yeah, exactly. We've shut this one down, is what we're saying. We just don't want to say it.
Yeah, and I walked through London, and I was born in London. I spent most of my life. I spent more of my life in London than I have anywhere else, any other one place. And it's the middle of the week. It's Wednesday, right? It's not school holidays. It's term time. It's normal busy stuff. It's just quiet. Yeah. It's just less going on. All the shops are far fewer people walking around, and this to me reminds me of the feeling of the early 90s recession.
Yes, it's more akin to that than it is to 2008.
And but it also feels like somehow the news, the mainstream news, is kind of glossing over it and going, well, things aren't great, but they're not that bad either. When actually they're really not good at all, and they're really crap for a lot of people. And when you look at an industry like the house building industry, which is a huge industry.
Yeah, it's a big percentage of GDP.
Basically collapsing, and now facing, that Molior report saying that people there's still going to be 40,000 homes being built next year in London. Well, that's because the ship has sailed, isn't it? And the budget's committed, and they're going to build them, but even though they know they can't sell them. Oh, I sent you that photograph.
Well, Charlie, they may not build them. I mean, and this is the thing. It is absolutely a juggernaut of an industry and a market. And it takes a very long time, because it may take you a year and a half from having the concept to build something. It'll take you a year and a half to get planning permission for your large residential tower of 15 stories. And that's at the quickest. Then you've actually got to demolish what's there, strip out, demolish, start your construction and get all of that done. It could be from start to finish a 5-year process for a single tower in London if things go well. That's just one.
And I sent you that today, didn't I? That
yeah.
I walked
Victoria Gardens,
and it had its layout of this is on the hoarding, right? Unit type, how many of them, and the square footage of each one. And you looked it up, and it was scheduled for completion in the summer we've just had, right?
Yep.
Never got built already. So already
they finished the demolition. They celebrated the demo in the middle of 23. So it's been over 2 years since the site has been cleared, which is why it makes sense that they were expecting practical completion in the summer of 25, 2 years for the construction phase, and then the sales would have taken place over the course of that, etc. But bear in mind, they received planning permission, I think, in 2015, did I say?
Yeah, 10 years ago.
Yeah. So 10 years. They took them until 23 to get the site demolished, which would have taken them, because it was a big office block with some contamination, etc. below. So that would have taken them a year and a half, maybe, and then 2 years to build out. But as you say, they haven't even started. And that is only 110. Well, that's what they have permission for. I think you showed 108 flats. It's nothing. It's peanuts. Yeah. And yet it's stalled.
And that's in that's in an expensive part of London, SW1.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and also not just expensive part of London, it's between Pimlico and Victoria, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So a really busy offices and commuter with a huge station. You would expect you might be able to sell those flats, great connections, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But and bear in mind, it was always planned, and this is what we haven't covered. Oh, sorry, I covered it briefly earlier. The only flats that you can viably build now are luxury. That's the only way that you can make the profit the developers need to make, is they actually have to build in very expensive places. They can't build in an average cost place because you can't make the money on it because of the land cost, the planning costs, as well as your labor and materials. So those apartments, those 108 apartments, were designated as luxury apartments, and even they aren't being built.
Yeah. So if new build companies are going to go bust, and lots of them are, I think the most recent figures are that it's accelerating, and the numbers now back up at what they were during COVID or whatever it was. If new build companies are going to go bust, and it's no longer financially viable to build new homes, at least in London and the southeast, what's going to happen to the new build targets set by the government?
Well, we've covered that. My last calculation from 5 months ago was that of the 1.5 million homes they claimed they would build over the 5 years, they would be lucky to hit 750,000, so half. And 750,000 is actually 150,000 less than the long-term average of the building. So not only would they be half of the target they set themselves, but they would be lower than any other 5-year period going back to 2012.
Well, I mean, with what we've just been discussing this evening, which is basically a marketplace where you can't build buildings for less than it costs, for less than the market will pay for them, and therefore no one is going to put up the millions, tens of millions, in some cases hundreds of millions of pounds for a development that they know they're not going to get the money back on.
Yeah.
So no one's going to do that, and it's going to affect employment, everything else. But you see, this creates a head fuck for people who think that, hang on a second, isn't the only solution to the housing crisis building new homes? Isn't that the only solution? Because that's what they've been saying for decades. Because build new homes is the only answer. Build and build, baby, build.
That does not, of and by itself, fix the problem. Until you fix lending, you do not fix the cost of housing.
It's a giant lie, isn't it? This whole thing that building new houses and building them faster is the only solution is a giant lie.
Yes.
Designed to keep the money coming, to lending happening for people to buy new builds. It's a giant lie. There isn't a national housing shortage. There really isn't. There are local ones. And there's definitely a shortage of social housing. Government meeting its own housing obligations. There's a shortage of that. There is not a national housing shortage. There isn't. It's all part of the massive lie to make people think, oh, we've got to tell the government to build more homes, because if they build more, then supply and demand tells us that the prices will come down.
Yeah.
And there are still otherwise intelligent people who believe that. And they somehow believe that the developers will just build because the government told them to. And mandatory target. It's a mandatory target, you see. We're going to build 1.5 million houses. Do you know why? Because it's mandatory.
Yes, I would like a mandatory target that I should be allowed to eat roughly 50 kilograms of sirloin per year, and I'd like my butcher to be told that he'll sell it to me at £5 a kilo, and I think that's entirely reasonable.
I think the government should make that mandatory immediately. Why not?
Yeah, speak to the butcher. Just tell him, no, I don't care how much your meat costs you. For him, it's going to be a £5.
It's so disingenuous the way the government, knowingly lies when they make these promises. They're not mandatory targets. And I don't know why they're I just don't understand why they're allowed to get away with even saying that they're mandatory when legally it's not even possible to make them mandatory. It really is. So, okay, we're in a real mess. What does this mean then? Because the next thing comes into my mind is, you say there's a 5 to 10 year horizon for the planning of new builds between the initial outset of planning, but buying the land, getting the financing going. So the very sort of
Yeah, it depends on the size of the scheme. So if you were planning to build a single 15-story tower, let's say, you could, if you'd already done the research on where you wanted to do it and there was a piece of land available, you could probably at a pace, at a big rush, if you are willing to pay quite a lot to grease the wheels, you could probably get that built in about 4.5 to 5 years from the moment that you start to go out and put an offer in on the land. But that's speedy. Now, when you talk about bigger developments, when they start talking about these mixed-use areas like Cambridge, where you have large business parks that are now being converted into mixed use. And mixed use means that you have homes and food and beverage and retail and offices, etc., in the same space, so that you build a little mini community, put a new high street in, put a couple of schools, all that sort of stuff. Each one of those plots within that area, within the overall area, has got a build timeline of between 12 and 20 years by the time each plot is finished. I mean, this is long-term thinking. You know, when you look at Milton Keynes when they built that. I said, now that's big, but when they built that, you know, that went on for decades of building, but it was all planned from the outset. And back then, the planning restrictions were a lot less onerous than they are today. But yeah.
And what's going to happen to our total population 10 years from now?
Well, it all depends on what we do with immigration. But if we were left to our own devices, it would fall dramatically because the fertility rate is, well, incredibly low at the moment. About 1.43 for across the nation, but about 1.22 for native mothers, which is unbelievably low, given the replacement is 2.1. If we allow immigration at the old levels, which was about 380,000 per year of net immigration, we might hold our own and stay at around the 69 million mark. But if we were to cut immigration, as successive governments have promised for decades, yeah, we would have a shrinking population, just as Japan does.
See, people, someone has said in the comments here that if you are poor, there is a housing shortage. And my answer to that is no, there's a money shortage, as in wages and earnings and house price. There isn't a shortage of actual homes. There's a shortage of homes that you can afford. And that's because of all the price pumping and inflation and lending money and that kind of stuff. Let's just run through a few of these points we've got here. So Claire Towell, who is the estate agent, I think, is that Claire from down in Cornwall? Some of the standard of these new builds are not great. Speed over quality, I'm afraid. But Alex, you're pointing out that that's kind of become a necessity for builders because the margins have been squeezed.
Correct.
They're having to cut corners, cut costs, cut on quality materials.
Well, yeah, there are three main things that you can do to make your profit margin stick. One of them is build it fast. Build it as fast as you bloody can. Get it sold. Don't be paying much in interest. That's option one. Option two, skimp on the materials. And I don't mean break the safety standards, because you're not allowed to do that. And everyone who goes on about, oh, these properties we build today, they're terrible. It's true. From a soundproofing perspective, yes, they're pretty terrible. But from an energy efficiency perspective, they have to meet certain standards. They are designed to last 80 odd years. Whether they will or not is another matter. They are modular so that you can make repairs on roofs without having to replace the whole thing. There's lots of cleverness behind it, but there are quality materials and there are quality materials. And obviously you can cut down on your materials. But the big one, the one that is screwing everyone, and I think is ruining everyone's life, is you make the fuckers smaller. People have less space because a developer only thinks about how much it costs him per square meter to build and how much he can sell it for per square meter. So if people can't afford a nice 100 square meter property, well, I'll build 70. And if they can't afford 70, I'll build 50. And if they can't afford 50, I'll build 40. And if they can't afford that, I will build co-living units where all they get is a bedroom and a shower and a loo, and all of their living space will be communal with everybody else in the block. And then they will only get, well, they're not just coming, they exist. They were only for students, but now they're making it into mainstream for professionals. And what you buy, or sorry, more commonly what you rent, you tend not to buy the co-living space, you tend to rent it. It's bought by one of the registered, associations. But you get between 20 and 24 square meters, which is a bedroom and a shower and loo, community living, and you are expected to pay in the region of £1,500 a month in rent for that.
Well, I'll see you in the communist kitchen. Oh, I mean the communal kitchen.
It's only borscht. All we have is borscht and vodka. That's it.
Wow. There's a few great comments here. XR2828 says, I'm seeing a lot of recent X new builds being sold for at least a third less.
That doesn't surprise me.
Daria says, I sold a flat in London for 30k less than I bought it in 2016.
Ouch. Sorry, Daria.
Brian E. Bentley, ironic surname given the comment, people who buy a new Mercedes know they will lose as soon as they drive off. Some new build buyers don't. That's very true.
Which is what Charlie's trying to fix.
That's what I'm trying to stop people doing. Ed says, what happened to the government getting rid of leasehold? Good question. It's going into the long grass. But they do appear to be pressing ahead with the Renters' Rights Bill. That passed its final hurdle in the Commons yesterday. Oh, that's going to be the worst chaos to hit the rental market in living memory. Optimus J says, the way things are going, a fair few things may fall soon. The AI bubble, housing developers, and the economy. It's a case of when, not if. You're quite right about the AI bubble. If you go and watch Sasha Yanchin's video on it, they're double accounting revenue. They're lending each other money backwards and forwards and calling it revenue, and they're raising money on the back of that revenue.
Oh, it's very frightening. And
they're buying their capex is increasing faster than their revenues are. It is a doom vortex. By the way, did you see what Elon Musk printed on the roof of his new giant data center?
No.
It doesn't say Microsoft. It says macro hard.
Hard. Yeah, that's his new. Macro hard is his new thing. Let's take on macro hard.
So it is a giant bubble, that AI bubble, and when it pops, it's going to be a loud bang we can hear from a long way away.
Well, the funny thing is, it matches almost exactly the .com figures.
But it's bigger. The leverage is bigger this time.
Yes.
Sharon Smith says new builds are slowing down in the Midlands, Charlie, reducing prices. Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for letting us know.
Wow.
Pharaoh 3D, who is my one and only viewer on Twitch. Hi, Pharaoh 3D. I'm in Scotland. And yeah, it started to slow down now, but that's only really in the last month or less. Okay, thank you. Interesting to hear. Alex Jenkins, I made this comment already. If you are poor, there is a national housing shortage. If you aren't poor, there is an abundance of houses. I hear the point. But the point is there's a shortage of affordable housing, not a shortage of houses. And therefore, building more doesn't make sense. And as Alex has explained very well in this video, for those of you who maybe joined recently, building small dwellings for people on low incomes isn't viable. And Optimus J has a question. Could we be talking about deflation within the next 2 or 3 years? I've heard mention of it on and off for the last 18 months or so. Do you have a view on that, Alex?
Yeah, well, we discussed that back in 23 because, I think Patricia believed that we were heading in that direction. I don't know. Back then, the answer was yes, it was possible. Now, looking at what they're doing and what I hate to think Rachel Reeves is going to do in a month's time in terms of the budget, I'm not sure if we're going to head into deflation proper. Disinflation, difficult. if we do, it will not be good. And lots of people go, no, but deflation's good. We like deflation. It's like, no, there are two types of deflation. When deflation is brought about, when things cost less because technology improves, and so you can build things more cheaply and have better quality things, then deflation is good. When you have deflation within an economy, simply because it's economically fucked, that is not good. It is not productive, and it does not help. What it means is that people will tend to not put money into the economy. You end up with a terrible spiral because, hey, it's going to cost less in X amount of time, so I'll just wait a bit, and then your entire economy stalls. And as Patricia says, yeah, deflation is job losses. Now, we're already seeing job losses, but whether we get to deflation, I don't know.
Yeah, there's still a lot of uncertainty. If the ceasefire holds in the Middle East, and we do get a new, more peaceful outlook in the Middle East, that's going to have, that's a big change on the world stage, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's difficult to see how that plays out. There's some things like that happening, but long may that ceasefire hold. Yeah, it's weird. So there's some comments here on. Okay, Jack says, I'm in Northern Ireland and prices are still going up by a lot. Yeah, that is true. I know that's.
But do you remember 2007, 2008, and what happened to Northern Ireland at the end of that cycle? Because Northern Ireland, just your house prices went through the roof until they didn't.
Yeah, they have been going up by a lot recently. That is true. But how long that sustains, I don't know. I mean, it's very, very hard because there's no data for it to see whether there are people relocating from England to Northern Ireland or from Scotland to Northern Ireland. It's very difficult to see. Alex Jenkinson asks, aren't they planning to build data centers in space next? Much cheaper, apparently.
Oddly, Charlie and I were discussing this earlier this week.
Worse. I'm sorry. It's really, there are lots of things that are cheap, but getting stuff into space is not just about one of the most expensive things that you can do at the moment. That's just honestly.
But I think that old Jeff Bezos has been reading too much of his William Gibson Neuromancer. So don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan. But the AIs in space, who was it? Tessia Ashpool owned the AIs in space. But not in the near future.
No. Sophie on YouTube says AI isn't a bubble. No, AI isn't a bubble, but its stocks are.
Yeah.
AI isn't going anywhere soon, but the stock valuations of AI companies is.
I've got to share this with you. Keep going. I've got to share this with you, and it may not be for your audience today, but
Andrew Dennis says 2026 is going to be so bad. It's horrible because actually, Alex, you and I discussed this on the phone earlier, and we should turn to it actually when you show me whatever you want to show me, which is, where does this all end up? Because we've got people selling big houses that nobody can buy. That's going to increase. And people who can afford to buy them won't be able to afford to heat them. I mean, you and I agree that the prospect of abandoned houses is something that's been almost impossible to imagine recently. But that's a prospect I think is going to return.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to show this, Charlie. It may be too long for people to read while they're here, but let me just...
What's it about?
It is AI apologizing yet again for being fucking useless.
Is there a link to it?
No.
Yeah, there is a link. Can you link to that? Hang on, I can't. It's too small to read. It's too small to read. Copy and paste it into a post on X and then give us the link to that. How about
that? Yeah, okay.
Okay. Yeah, because you mentioned the death and poverty words to me on the phone again this evening. And again, a lot of our viewers won't know what that means, but you've been saying since 2022 that there is an inexorable decline in GDP per person, like standard living cost, like just we will not be able to afford houses. there will be not enough jobs. And for some time, until finally we emerge out of the darkness and suddenly there's this post-scarcity society, it's going to get utterly bleak. You've mentioned workhouses for the poor, and you're not joking. When you've mentioned this, and it sounds amusing when you discuss it.
It's pretty dystopian, but yeah.
But the reality of it is anything but amusing. And we're talking about our parents. People who can't sell their houses now, who want to downsize but now can't downsize, stuck in houses they can't afford to heat. And they can't afford to downsize because now what they're downsizing to has gone up in price.
Yeah. Although, this was not. I've got to be honest. Our parents, who 70s, 80s, that sort of thing, I think they will be okay. The younger component of our cohort, so younger Gen X, millennials and below, it's a very scary time, because so much money is going to get eaten up by the care system, because people are living much longer and they're living in ill health. And care homes now, where you get decent care homes, where you get nursing, etc., are anywhere between 80 and 120,000 pounds a year, which means that all of this wealth that people talk about the younger generations inheriting, much of it is going to get eaten. The bit that doesn't get eaten by care is going to get eaten by Rachel Reeves or whoever is running the country in terms of tax, inheritance tax increases, which I'm sure are coming. I predicted that years ago. And in the interim, we've got more and more people on universal credit, because we've narrowed the gap between the median wage in this country and the minimum wage. There are fewer incentives, and you can see our productivity is through the floor. They talk about GDP per capita has increased. GDP has increased. Well, it's only increased because of public sector spending. It really is quite frightening. And because people can't afford to maintain these big houses that are going to come on the market in their droves over the next 20 years as the boomer generation dies, and their maintenance costs are huge, that is the I Am Legend scenario, where you see, abandoned houses. And as we discussed, you can't squat in them. That was criminalized in 2012. So, you will get arrested and you can spend however many months it is in jail and £5,000 fine. So there's no squatters' rights anymore, and people can't afford these houses. So people are not going to be able to sell them, despite what's left after the care costs and so on and so forth. And the population, unless we continue to allow immigration, is going to be shrinking. So either we change the makeup of this country enormously, and we just accept a huge amount of immigration and turn ourselves into effectively what we are becoming anyway, which is a third world country very quickly, or we end up with not being able to pay our universal credit bills and therefore having to enact workhouses. And by workhouses, it was more shelter as a service, but then you went to the main square, as you used to in medieval times, and you were picked up by a government transport, either to take you to a field or a building site or a public area that needed cleaning, so that you could earn your universal income. I just can't see a way that we can beat that unless, as we discussed, we in this country develop and massively produce a new industry. And the government have been trying to pin their hopes on biotech over the last decade or more, with Cambridge, Oxford, and London. And unfortunately, biotechs just don't want to be in the UK. They may start here from the universities, but all the money is in America, and even there, the money is drying up. So, yeah, it's bleak. It's pretty fucking bleak.
Wow. Little Carol says, my dad was born in the workhouse in 1928. My grandma's body was sold to the hospital for dissection when she died. My granddad was killed by a vat of molten steel in a factory in Sheffield. Wow. Carol, I know you from before, so I know that you're actually telling seriously. But if I didn't know you and your backstory, I would be thinking that you were making that up. That's an extraordinary story. Yeah. Well, listen, guys, it's come to that time. It's time to wrap up. Thanks for watching. And Alex, thank you very much again for your contribution as ever. Stay happy, everybody.
I do like Ed's comment. I feel really cheerful now.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. That wasn't the happiest one, was it? But I think it's important. We all need to know about it. Hope that was helpful. Have a good one.